Hey there, thanks for stopping in to watch my how to make 1 to 35th scale trees for your dioramas. The goal here is to make quick, easy, and fairly detailed trees to help make your diorama pop. So the trees we're going to try and make are going to look something like this. Now it's not going to be exactly like this tree, but it's kind of what we're going for. I've got all the materials laid out here, but to give you an idea, this is a diorama I'm working on, and it needs a tree to go right where that little Q-tip is. So something that's going to not go over the sides, but it's going to give this some depth. All right, so if I'm missing anything, it'll be down here below. But the most critical part of this is seafoam. You can get it from Amazon or AliExpress or whatever, but some kind of seafoam. Then you're going to need diluted PVA glue. You can use Elmer's or Mod Podge. Make sure it's matte if you use Mod Podge, but basically get some kind of container, mix about 1/3 to a half of it with your glue, and then put water and the rest of it, give it a good shake, and you got diluted PVA glue. Next, you'll need CA glue, preferably the Instacure. Then you're gonna need some kind of foliage. I prefer flock. This is called, they call it blended tuft, but I call it flock. Preferably the thinner you get it, the better. Like this stuff right here is really thin, but as you can see, it works really well in trees. It's gonna get kind of a leafy feel. Next, you're gonna need some kind of paste. I'm using Tester's Craft Paste, and then something to scoop it out and put it onto your tree. That'll basically blend any branches that you attach during the build. Then or you can use Mr. Surfacer, and to me extra thin. If you've ever made cast texture, it does the same thing. It's a bit more controlled, but it's a bit more toxic, so please wear a respirator. Then you need some kind of base paint. So I'm using, this is beige, but it's basically deck tan. If you have deck tan, try and get that. My local hobby store is out, so I had to make my own. Or you can use flat brown or whatever color tree you're going for. Just make sure you've got the base color for that. Next, you'll need an oil wash, preferably a dark oil wash. To do that, you need odorless thinner, an oil, paint, and then something to mix it in. And then you'll need sticks, of course, little sticks here. Get these from your backyard, out in a field or something. Depending on the type of tree you're wanting to make will determine what kind of sticks you're getting. I got a bunch of straight ones. I'll be combining these to make an actual tree, kind of like this one here. But besides the sticks, you need clippers, tweezers, X-Acto knife, little scissors, and then some kind of gauged wire to help put the pieces together, or the trees together, give it some support. Some kind of gauged wire that it has some give to it, but it doesn't give so much that it's just gonna fall over.
Here we have the materials needed to build the tree. I organized all my sticks by size to see which ones I'll use for the trunk and branches. Once I find the trunk I want, I go ahead and cut/sand down all the points where my branches will attach. When I'm doing this, I'm paying attention to the direction I want the branches to stick out and then cut them to that angle. Next, I take my X-Acto blade and do a pre-drill, so it's easier and safer when I use my hand drill. I'm making holes for the wires which will act as supports to the branches. Once all my holes are drilled in the trunk and branches, I cut my wire and use CA glue to seat the wire into the trunk. Next, I go through and do the same thing with the branches. I do end up cutting down the wires that I put into the branches to fit, but it's better to have them longer in the beginning and then having to cut them down than being too short in the beginning and having to try and dig them out. Once I glue the branches onto the trunk, I get my seafoam and pick a few pieces that'll work for the tree I'm making. Basically, I'm cleaning up the seafoam so I have multiple options to make the crown of my tree. Seafoam has a lot of little leaves in it, so be very careful when cleaning it up or it'll snap the delicate branches. Right here you see me attaching the seafoam to my homemade tree trunk and branches. Be careful when doing this. As stated before, it's easy to break the seafoam and accidentally poke your fingers with a sharp wire. There is no real rhyme or reason to putting the tree together, just make the tree look like a tree. I do end up getting a foam base to put my tree on, as well as drilling out the bottom of the trunk and attaching a thicker wire for ground support. It's always nice to do a test fit on your diorama to see if you like it. Go ahead and make adjustments as needed. Now, CA glue cures really fast, so pretty much right away you can get after it with a plaster. All you're wanting to do here is help blend the sticks and seafoam you attach together so it doesn't look built and helps it appear more natural. Now remember, less is more here. And try to give the plaster a bark texture by running the plaster in one direction and dipping into it once it covers your joints. After the plaster dries overnight, it's time to prime and paint. I used Tamiya XF19 Sky Gray for my primer, which worked out just fine, but if I had black, I would have used that instead. It'll give it a natural shadow look. But be sure to wear a respirator when airbrushing so you don't inhale fumes and chemicals. It also helps if you have a spray booth. Now that's going to circulate all the chemicals out away from you, but the respirator is like a fail-safe. And that's the tree primed, and I'm going to go ahead and act like one of those big shots and for a moment just do an advertisement. But this one's for myself. So this is my Instagram account where I post finished work, and every time I'm at the bench, I'm updating my story, which part of that story goes into my highlighted reels, which is below the description. It's little circles there. So if you want to see more of my works in progress from me besides my YouTube diorama updates, if you want to see more of my personal life and get better pictures of my finished models, or just want to say hi, go ahead, shoot me a follow on Instagram. I'd love to hear from you guys. I'm pretty active on there. Like I said, every time I'm at the bench, I'm posting to my story about my personal life, all that fun jazz. So if you don't already, go follow me on Instagram. Hope to see you there. Now back to the video. Here you see me painting my homemade concoction for deck tan since I'm going for a lighter color tree. However, as you'll see at the end of the video, when I show you guys some of the trees I've made, you can add any color you desire. Here I've got some colors. So I've got frost white, buff, flat earth, German camo brown, German camo bright green, and a dark oil wash. Mine is burnt umber. And for this, I like to use a wet palette. Parchment paper is perfect for that. So essentially starting out here, I'm using lighter colors first, which in this case is frost white. I'm sort of dry brushing the tree to help get some highlights to show. Kind of, you know, since it's a cream colored tree, the white's gonna help bring out the bark just a little bit. Next, I'm using buff to sort of buff up parts of the tree. That may be a dope dad joke, but that's quite literally what I'm doing here. Along with the white, it helps highlight parts of the tree while giving it some visual interest. After that, we move on to flat earth, which is the brighter of the two browns. I'm using this to help add shadows, so being as this is the brighter brown, it'll be covering more surface area than the darker brown. I'm wanting to accentuate the shadows a bit, as we'll be using the darker brown to help get depth into all of the darker spots to add a bit of visual interest. It's a small detail, but the little things add up. So once that's about 2/3 of the way dry, mix your white and buff and get a bit more water to make a wash. This goes over everything we just did to blend it all together. It'll help the end result be subtle about the details and not be too prominent. Now, if you'd like to add moss, this is how I do it. Get that bright green paint and start doing the same thing we did with the flat earth, but in spots moss would grow. Most of my moss is facing north, with some of it blending around the branches. After that's about half dried, get some of that green flock and put a bit of it on the green paint to help it set. Now afterwards, I went ahead and added some PVA glue and then sprinkled more flock to help it build up on the tree. Now when you're putting this on, remember moss grows in little corners where it's humid, typically facing north, so just remember that. But after all that is dried, get your oil wash and cover your entire tree with it. This helps tone down all the colors while making the bark pop. Try and build up the oil in spots where shadows will be, like when we did the brown paint. Now once that's sat for about 20 minutes, get your diluted PVA glue and flock. If you can, get a spray bottle. It'll make this process a hell of a lot easier. Basically, what you're wanting to do is wet the seafoam with the diluted PVA glue, then immediately sprinkle on the flock to help build up the leaves on the tree. After a second or two, tap your tree like a cigarette to help get excess flock off so you can see how well it's building up. Once you're satisfied, get a fine threaded brush and gently take off all the excess flock from the branches and trunk. Once I got that done, I went ahead and glued down the tree where I wanted it to my diorama. Next, I take my Tamiya putty and some small twigs to make roots. Try and carve the bark texture into the putty. It'll look better for the finished product. Now, once it is dried, paint the putty like you did the tree. I waited until my paint was about 1/2 to 2/3 dry before painting each layer here. That way it helps blend the colors just a tad bit more. I also went in and painted the roots afterwards with the darker German camo brown to help make those colors pop. Now, just so you guys know, this is a step you can totally skip. This is actually the first time I've put roots down on a tree. I typically just kind of throw it in there, put grass around it, but I went ahead and wanted to make roots. Once that is dried, you want to give that part of the tree an oil wash, make it blend with the rest of the tree, and voila, now you have yourself a tree worthy of a diorama. This one here is not extremely extravagant, and I've done better in the past in my opinion, but for the diorama I'm making, this works just fine, and I had a blast doing it, which is what matters most. So that pretty much sums up my how to make a 1 to 35th scale tree for dioramas. Scratch built, quick, easy, and fun. This process takes about 2 days to do if you work on it for about 3 hours a day, not including drying time. Here is my finished tree on a not finished diorama. If you'd like to see me finish this dio, hit that subscribe button and follow me on Instagram to get updates. If you don't already know, I'm part of a podcast crew called the Micro Machines Podcast, where we talk about one-to-one military vehicles like tanks, planes, ships, and other cool vehicles/systems and blend them into the modeling world. We have a Discord if you'd like to join. The link is down in the description below. We host group builds, which is what this diorama is for. We're currently hosting a Cold War group build. So go ahead, come join us, talk to modelers from all over the world, and get to it. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Stay tuned for more. Stay safe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.